I told you to clear this field immediately.
That's what the woman in the pearl Lexus screamed at her crew. Two men in green polos drove a brush mower straight through the alfalfa my wife planted last spring before her cancer came back. By the time I got home, honey was running across the prairie grass like spilled wine. 3 of my beehives were splinters. Maisie was barking at a stranger holding a clipboard on my own land. The HOA president stood there pointing like she'd been hired by the devil himself. She thought a printed map on an iPad gave her the right to destroy 40 acres of Brooks family homestead. What she didn't know was that I'd personally surveyed and stamped the original plat for her subdivision 16 years ago. The boundary she was waving around had been forged. So I didn't yell. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and let her keep digging. Tell me below. Would you have stopped them or let them bury themselves? The name on my surveyor's license is Thomas Brooks. For 32 years, I walked the boundaries of Elbert County, Colorado, with a theodolite and a field book. My boots never stayed clean for more than an afternoon. I retired 18 months ago, the week my wife Catherine finished her last round of chemo. She got 4 good months before the cancer came back. Now it's just me, the house, a golden retriever named Maisie, and 60 acres of prairie. My great-grandfather Josiah Brooks fenced it with his own hands in 1887, the year the Union Pacific first ran a siding out to this corner of Colorado. The house faces east. On clear mornings, you can see the snow on Pikes Peak, 100 miles south. The hayfield runs north from the barn, 40 acres of timothy and brome that I still cut and bale myself every July. The apiary sits along the west tree line, where the wind breaks against the cottonwoods, and the bees come home heavy from the wildflower meadow. And in the middle of it all, 2 acres of alfalfa. Catherine planted it in the spring of 2023, kneeling with a packet of seeds and a spade. She told me the deer would love it once it came up. It came up. The deer loved it. Catherine didn't make it to see it bloom. Stonebridge Estates was built in 2010, right up against my south fence line. 140 houses on what used to be dry land grazing. I know the boundary of that subdivision better than anyone alive, because I was the surveyor of record. I walked every property line, drove every iron pin, and stamped the plat map with my registered professional license number. Not 1 square foot of that subdivision touches my family's land. The CC&Rs don't apply to me. They never could. Rebecca Whitfield moved into Stonebridge in 2014. Everyone called her Becca. Blonde, blocky, always in a linen blazer over yoga pants even in August. Drove a pearl white Lexus she washed twice a week. By 2018, she had herself elected HOA president. By 2020, she had fined more homeowners than the previous 3 boards combined. Flagpole too tall, garage door the wrong shade of beige, basketball hoop visible from the street. People paid, people moved. The board backed her every time. She never bothered me. Not for 8 years. Her husband Daniel served on the county planning commission. I figured she knew better than to stir up a licensed surveyor. A man who could read a plat map in his sleep wasn't someone she'd want to corner. Then, in March, a certified letter showed up in my mailbox. Notice of non-compliance. Failure to conform to community aesthetic standards. Full landscaping remediation required within 30 days or escalating fines up to $750 per day. Enclosed, a printout labeled, Updated Stonebridge Estates Boundary Map. It shaded my hayfield, my alfalfa, my apiary, 40 acres of Brooks family homestead, in pink. A fat black line declared it inside the HOA. I sat at the kitchen table with that letter and Maisie's chin on my knee. I laughed until I had to take my glasses off to wipe my eyes. Then I called my old attorney, Roland, who laughed too, and told me to save the letter and wait for her next move. The next move came on a Thursday at 8 in the morning. I was pouring a second cup of coffee when I heard the Lexus crunch up my gravel drive. She stepped out in her blazer and her sunglasses, clipboard under her arm, and walked straight to my porch without being invited. "Mr. Brooks," she said, smiling the way a cat smiles, "this board has more authority than you think. You'll see." The next morning was a Tuesday. At 7, I was in the apiary with the smoker and a tub of sugar syrup. Engines came up the back pasture road, 3 of them, a white pickup, a flatbed trailer, and a bright green skid steer with a brush cutter attached to the front. The kind of rig a municipality uses to clear ditches. I set the smoker down in the dirt and walked out past the cottonwoods to see 4 men in matching green polos already unloading orange steaks. The foreman was a wiry guy in his 40s, with a goatee and a clipboard. He checked a paper, pointed at my alfalfa, and yelled something to the operator. The skid steer started rolling. It hit the first hive before I could cross the fence. There's a sound a beehive makes when a brush mower goes through it. I can't describe it any better than saying it was the sound of 2 years of work dying in about 4 seconds. The box split, the frames scattered. Honey poured out in that slow molasses way honey does when it meets dirt. 10,000 bees came up in a cloud of rage. The crew scattered. The operator killed the machine. The bees settled on every warm thing they could find. The back of the foreman's neck. The front grille of the Lexus, idling at the edge of my drive. My own bare forearms. I didn't flinch. I've kept bees for 12 years. They know my scent. They crawled across me like I was part of the furniture. "Who ordered this?" I said, quiet, even. The foreman was slapping his own neck and cursing. He held up his clipboard like it was going to protect him. "HOA compliance sweep. I got the work order from Mrs. Whitfield. Said the property line was moved." Becca climbed out of the Lexus with her sunglasses on and her phone already in her hand. She walked up with that little chin tilt she did when she wanted someone to know she was in charge. She didn't look at the dead hive. She didn't look at me. She looked at the crew. "Keep going," she said. "I have 30 days of backlog on this property." "Ma'am," the foreman said, "there's a lot of bees." "Those aren't even registered with the county," Becca snapped. "Get back in the cab." I laughed once, short, like a cough. "Show me the recorded plat, Mrs. Whitfield." She turned to me finally, and the smile was back. The cat smile. She held up her iPad. A map was open on the screen. It was shaded in the same pink as the letter. The same fat black line ran through the middle of my alfalfa. "The amended plat was filed with the county in March. You're welcome to file a dispute. In the meantime, I have every right to enforce HOA landscaping standards inside the boundary." I took my phone out. I didn't make a show of it. I just slid it out of my shirt pocket and tapped the camera open. And I took a picture of the screen on her iPad. Then I took a picture of her face. Then I took a picture of the foreman. Then I took a picture of the skid steer, the trailer, and the dead hive. Then the truck door, where the magnetic sign said Pro Green Turf Solutions, Parker, Colorado. "Get his business card," I told the foreman, "and yours." He fumbled one out of his clip and handed it over. "Cody Redmond, operations lead." Becca watched all of this with the confidence of a woman who had never once lost an argument she didn't want to lose. "File whatever you want, Mr. Brooks. By the time you find a lawyer willing to take on an HOA board, we'll be done." "I'm sure," I said. She got back in the Lexus. The skid steer fired up. The brush cutter dropped. It hit the second hive a minute later, and then the third. By the time the crew left at 9:40, my west tree line looked like a war zone. Honey dripping off the tailgate, frames of comb scattered in the prairie grass, the smell of diesel exhaust mixing with the smell of crushed sweet clover. Dead bees on my bootlaces, on my collar, on the brim of my hat. I went inside. I washed my hands. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The first call was to Colorado Department of Agriculture, Pesticide Enforcement Division. The second was to the state apiarist, reporting 3 destroyed registered hives. The third was to my insurance agent, Walt Finnegan, who asked me if he should come out and photograph everything himself. I told him yes. The fourth, "Gloria," I said. "I need to see every plat amendment filed against Stonebridge Estates in the last 4 years. Every single one. And I want to see the originals." "Give me an hour," she said. Gloria Henderson had been the Elbert County recorder for 23 years. She was a short woman, with silver hair she still pinned up the old way. Her coffee cup said "World's Okayest Mom." Her memory for property records was sharper than most title companies' software. Her husband Wade and I had built a fence together in '97. When I pushed open the glass door of the records office, she was already pulling a banker's box off the shelf behind her desk. "Thomas," she said, "you're going to want to sit down for this one." The annex smelled like old paper and reheated coffee. The fluorescence buzzed in that off-key way government lights always seem to buzz. I pulled up a folding chair and set my laptop on the Formica counter. Gloria laid a manila folder between us and tapped it twice. Stonebridge Estates Plat History, 6 filings. The original was recorded December 4th, 2010. Signed and stamped by Thomas Brooks, professional land surveyor, Colorado license number 3241. That's you, I know. 4 minor adjustments between 2012 and 2022. Easements, a lot split, a road dedication. Nothing touches your south fence line. I know that too. She pulled out the last document, a crisp, fresh plat, dated March 14th, 2024. And this one, filed 8 months ago, adds 15 acres to Stonebridge's northern parcel, described with new meets and bounds. The new line runs 130 feet north of your old fence, straight through your alfalfa field. I flipped it over. The approval block was stamped and signed in blue ink. Daniel Whitfield, Elbert County Planning Commission. Approved. There was a surveyor's certification block, too. The signature was mine. Except it wasn't. It was close. Whoever had done it had traced the long sweep of my T and the little hook on my B, but the stamp on the right side said PLS 3409 instead of 3241. I had never, in 32 years, misnumbered my own license. Gloria watched my face. She was already whispering, even though nobody else was in the office. Thomas, something's off. I can't tell you what. But I've been here a long time, and I know when paperwork doesn't smell right. Be careful who you ask about this before you're ready. Who logged the digital file? She turned her monitor toward me. The metadata field read, file uploaded by Jerome Pickering, Planning Department Clerk, 4:47 p.m., March 14th, 2024. I didn't say anything for a minute. I just stared at the screen. The fluorescence buzzed. My breathing slowed the way it does when I'm driving a pin into hard ground. Jerome Pickering, Daniel Whitfield, Rebecca Whitfield, Stonebridge's northern parcel, 15 acres taken straight out of my hayfield on paper by people who thought a retired man wasn't going to look. Can you print me a certified copy of all 6 filings? I asked. Both the originals and the metadata logs. Everything signed and sealed. Already doing it. I drove home with that folder on the passenger seat. Maisie met me at the porch with her tail low because she could smell diesel and dead bees on me. Inside, the answering machine was blinking. 42 messages. I started playing them on the kitchen speaker. 12 were from HOA residents, neighbors I'd said hello to at the mailbox for a decade. They left polite but firm messages, asking me to bring my property into compliance. Someone had pulled a full phone tree. 8 were from unknown numbers, angry, some slurred. One said I was dragging down property values. One said I was a disgrace to Stonebridge. Stonebridge isn't my subdivision. Stonebridge has never been my subdivision. One message was from Becca, short, professional. The HOA had filed a formal complaint with the county assessor, requesting a reassessment of parcel boundaries on my land. The assessor's office had notified her they would begin review within 30 days. One message was from the county assessor's office, confirming the same. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and pulled up the Colorado Open Records Act request portal. In the narrative field, I typed a careful, specific request, all written in electronic correspondence between Daniel Whitfield, Rebecca Whitfield, Jerome Pickering, and any employee or officer of Summit Ridge Development. Dated from January 1st, 2023 through present. Also, all internal memos regarding Stonebridge Estates plat amendments. I paid the $20 fee. I hit submit. The phone rang. Emma. Dad, she said. Her voice was wet and small. Dad, there's a post on next door. It says you threatened a jogger with a rifle on Highway 86 this morning. The girls in my dorm are asking me if it's true. Is it true? I closed the laptop. Maisie put her chin on my knee. I did not answer for a long time. Emma drove home that weekend. I told her to take the interstate and to stay off Highway 86 for now. She laughed when I said that, then she stopped laughing. I picked her up at the off-ramp and we drove in silence. She watched me when she thought I wasn't looking. Monday morning, a second crew came. Not Pro-Green. A different company. A different truck. White Ford, stenciled with black letters on the side. Tri-State Vegetation Management. 2 men in white Tyvek suits with 40-gallon tanks on their backs and wand sprayers in their hands. I was on the porch with coffee. Maisie's ears went up before I heard the engine. She sat up, then stood, then growled low. The driver rolled down his window. Mr. Brooks, we're here for the herbicide application. HOA compliance schedule. You're not spraying my land. Sir, we have a signed work order. He held up a laminated sheet. Boundary marked and approved. We operate inside the HOA perimeter only. Show me your license. He did. Certified applicator. Every credential in order. That wasn't my fight. He was doing exactly what his paperwork told him to do. His paperwork said the HOA had the right to spray up to a line 130 feet inside my fence. You have a flag line? I asked. Pink flagging. Staked yesterday evening by Mrs. Whitfield. Who told you to spray right up to the line? HOA specifications. Standard turf maintenance. Broad spectrum. Broad spectrum. Glyphosate plus a secondary dicamba formula. I knew the mix. I'd used it on my own fence rows for a decade. It kills everything green. It drifts in a breeze. I stepped off the porch and walked out to my south fence. The pink flags were there, stapled to metal T-posts, bright in the morning sun. They ran 130 feet north of the old iron pins I'd driven myself in 2010. They ran straight through Catherine's alfalfa. Spray your side of the flags, I said. Not one drop over. If it drifts, I am going to own your company by supper. The applicator nodded. Yes, sir. The wind was out of the southwest at 12 miles an hour. I took 10 steps back. I pulled my phone out and opened the stopwatch. Then I opened the camera and started recording. They sprayed. They tried. But dicamba at 12 miles an hour in a prairie headland drifts whether you want it to or not. Within 40 minutes, the south edge of Catherine's alfalfa had a fine brown haze settling on it. Within 2 hours, the first leaves were curling. By that evening, the 2 acres she planted on her knees were yellow. I walked out there at dusk with a kneeling pad and a soil probe. I took samples from 16 locations, GPS tagged each one with my phone, bagged them separately, labeled them in pencil, and sealed them in a hard cooler. The sample bags went to Fort Collins the next morning by same-day courier to the CSU Agricultural Extension Residue Lab. I'd known the lab director, Dr. Margaret Stanwyck, for 15 years. She returned my call inside 2 hours. Thomas, I'll have preliminary numbers in 72 hours. Before I'd finished with the samples, I found the fawn, a yearling white-tailed doe. She was lying in the corner where the alfalfa met the cottonwoods. Her forelegs curled under her, no visible wound. The glyphosate hadn't killed her directly, something else had. The chemical stink of the spray was still hanging low over the grass. She had lain down in it, folded her head to her flank, and stopped breathing. I knelt beside her for a long time. Maisie sat at my side, still, the way she does at funerals. When I stood up, I pulled a trail camera off a fence post and swapped the memory card. I'd mounted 6 of them along the boundary the week after the first letter arrived. Every monument photographed, every datum established. I walked each camera, one by one. I pulled each card. I replaced each with a fresh one. When I came back to the house, Emma was sitting on the porch step with Maisie's head on her lap. She had been crying. "Dad," she said, "why won't you just fight her?" "I am fighting her," I said. "You just can't see it yet." I went inside. I sat down at the desk in my office. I opened the laptop. 3 emails were waiting. One from Dr. Stanwyck with a lab intake receipt. One from my insurance agent with 58 time-stamped photographs of the destroyed apiary. And one from the Colorado Open Records Act portal, marked "Responsive Documents Attached." 412 pages. At the top of the document list was a folder labeled Summit Ridge Development, Stonebridge Northern Expansion. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. I didn't open the folder yet. I just sat there for a long minute and listened to the house creak and Maisie breathe and the prairie wind move through the cottonwoods. This wasn't harassment. This wasn't pettiness. This was a taking. Someone wanted my land, and they were already counting the money. I read until 4 in the morning. I made notes. I made timelines. I printed everything. By 3, I had the whole thing laid out on the kitchen table in neat rows under the hanging lamp. The first batch of emails was between Daniel Whitfield and Gavin Dutton. He was Vice President of Acquisitions at Summit Ridge Development, LLC, based in Greenwood Village. Their exchanges started in February of 2023. Casual at first. A dinner at a steakhouse called Osteria, then lunch at the Cherry Hills Country Club. Then photos of a hand-drawn sketch, forwarded from Daniel's personal Gmail to Daniel's county email and back again. The sketch was of Stonebridge Estates with an extension drawn in pencil north of the current boundary. The extension sat on top of my hayfield. The second batch got worse. Gavin Dutton's pro forma put the new parcel at 15 acres, 62 luxury single-family lots at an average of $500,000 each. Net land value after entitlement, $2.4 million. Summit Ridge's proposed acquisition price from the HOA, $75,000. The HOA, per Daniel's suggestion, would then transfer the parcel back to the Whitfields LLC for a token $5,000 as a development incentive. $2.4 million in equity, funneled through a shell the Whitfields controlled. The third batch was Becca. Text screenshots Daniel had saved to his county drive by accident. Brooks is a recluse widower. He'll fold by summer. Pickering has the plat filed. Keep the paper trail clean. If the old man gets loud, I'll drop a 911 on him. My friend at dispatch owes me. Developers want closing by October. The fourth batch was Jerome Pickering, a 29-year-old planning clerk with a gambling problem and a second DUI pending. Daniel had him on a hook and was paying him off the books in cash. I found a receipt for $7,000 that Daniel had filed as consulting in his own personal expense report. I also found the metadata logs. Pickering was the one who had uploaded the forged plat. He was the one who copy-pasted a scanned version of my old signature and fabricated a fake PLS number. There was more. A land use attorney named Vanessa Colburn, who doubled as a realtor, had drafted the transfer documents. She'd also been copied on the very first email. By 4 in the morning, I had it all cross-indexed. A wire fraud case, a public corruption case, a Colorado forgery case, a straight-up land theft case. I'd also seen my own signature on a plat I had not signed. I'd seen my wife's alfalfa field described as blight in a developer's pro forma. I'd seen a woman plan to call 911 on me the way you'd plan a dinner reservation. I went into the bedroom. Maisie was asleep at the foot of the bed. The framed photo of Catherine on the dresser was from our 10th anniversary. She was laughing, a slice of coconut cake in her hand, her hair blown by the wind off the porch in Destin. I picked it up. I looked at her for a minute. "They picked the wrong field, love," I said. I went back to the kitchen. I put everything in a banker's box. I labeled the lid with the date and a single word: evidence. I carried the box to the gun safe in the den and spun the dial. I put the box inside next to my grandfather's M1 Garand and my father's Colt Peacemaker, next to Catherine's wedding ring, the one I'd never worn but could never bring myself to sell. Then I sat down at the desk, opened a new email, and started typing. 2. Samuel Ashford, Esquire. Subject: I need a lawyer, and I think you need a client. Samuel Ashford called me back at 8:15 the next morning. He'd been in my kitchen once, the Thanksgiving his wife Diane first started chemo, the year before Catherine did. Diane had died on a Tuesday in October. Catherine followed 14 months later. Sam and I had sat on my porch that December and said about 4 words an hour and drunk about 4 fingers of bourbon each. He's 61, a senior partner at a Denver firm that does federal public corruption and civil rights work, and he takes 2 pro bono matters a year. "Thomas," he said, "I've read what you sent me. I'm in. I'll fly a paralegal out this afternoon. We'll want your originals. They're already in the safe." "Good. I want a forensic document examiner on that plat by end of week. I also want an independent GPS survey by someone with no connection to the county. Do you have somebody?" "Henry Caldwell." "Perfect. Tell him to set control monuments with centimeter GPS and to record the field notes in ink. He's going to testify eventually." By noon, I had my team. Henry Caldwell pulled up in his old Chevy Suburban at 1. Henry is 68, bald on top, white beard, arms like rebar. He'd trained me. He'd stamped plats in this county since before I had a license. He walked the North Line with me, said 4 words: rebar, iron pin, 1987, and set up his tripod. Eleanor Whitmore came over on foot through the east gate. She's 72, a widow, 3rd-generation rancher. Her husband Cecil used to lease hay rights from my father in the 70s. She brought a manila envelope of original photographs of my family's fence line, going back to 1961. She brought a notarized affidavit from her own kitchen table, and she brought a loaf of banana bread. "My grandson, Pastor Will, is on the planning commission," she said. "He doesn't know what his colleagues are up to. I want you to know he'd never sign off on a forgery." "I believe you, Eleanor." "Good, because when the time comes, I want him to be the one who votes against them." Nathan Pierce came over at 3. He was 29, a reporter for the Elbert County News, and he'd been working a year on a long-form piece about rural land fraud in the Front Range corridor. He'd already been sniffing around Summit Ridge development. When I showed him the Cora documents, he put his coffee down and did not pick it up again for 2 hours. "Thomas," he said when he left, "I'm writing this. I'm going to run it the night of the commission hearing, not before. Embargo." Agreed. By that evening, the strategy was set. It came in 4 layers. Layer 1, criminal. Sam filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Attorney General's Office of Public Integrity for forgery of public records, a Class 5 felony under CRS 18-8114. He also sent a dossier to the FBI Denver field office. Cross-county wire fraud on a scheme worth more than $1 million is federal. Layer 2, civil. Sam drafted 3 documents: a cease and desist letter to the HOA, a tort claim notice against Daniel Whitfield in his official capacity, a civil complaint against Summit Ridge Development for conspiracy to commit land fraud. Layer 3, regulatory. I filed for Right to Farm Act protection with the Colorado Department of Agriculture under CRS 35 3.5101. Right to farm protects any agricultural operation that pre-existed a conflicting land use. My hay, my bees, my alfalfa had all been in place long before Stonebridge's first foundation was poured. Colorado law was on my side before the HOA ever existed. Layer 4, evidentiary. Trail cameras relocated and secured. Forensic scan of the 1887 deed. Henry's independent GPS survey with centimeter precision control monuments. CSU lab results on the glyphosate drift. Veterinarian necropsy on the fawn. Certified copies of every plat filing from Gloria's office. Signed affidavits from Eleanor Whitmore and 4 other old neighbors on the east side. And one more step. I served a formal preservation notice on the county clerk, Daniel Whitfield, and the HOA. It was a legal hold on all digital and paper records pertaining to Stonebridge Estates. Once that hold was served, destroying or altering any record became itself a felony. That Thursday evening I drove into town and sat in the back row of the monthly HOA meeting. I wore a clean flannel and my reading glasses. I took out a legal pad and a pen and I listened. Becca saw me within 90 seconds. Her face cycled through confusion, calculation, and contempt. At the public comment break, she walked straight to my row with Troy Hammond, the HOA secretary, in tow. "Are you ready to settle, Mr. Brooks?" I did not look up from my notes. "Still listening, Mrs. Whitfield." She did not take the hint. 3 days later, a post went up on the Stonebridge Estates private Facebook group. 280 members, all of them with a view of my hayfield from their back decks. The post came from Becca's personal account, pinned to the top of the page. "Urgent neighborhood safety update. Our HOA has received multiple reports this week. An elderly, unstable man living at the north edge of the subdivision has been pacing his fence line. Residents describe him as carrying a rifle. He has threatened 2 women walking with their children. Please keep your children indoors. I am working with local law enforcement to keep our community safe." She didn't name me. She didn't have to. She posted a photograph of my mailbox, my address, my truck in my own driveway. The photo was taken from the sidewalk of her cul-de-sac with a telephoto lens. Nathan Pierce screenshotted the post inside of 2 minutes. He'd set a Google alert for Becca's name the week before. 4 hours later, Becca called 911. The dispatcher's transcript would, weeks later, make its way into the AG's case file. "He's walking the fence with a long gun. He just pointed it at a jogger. She's terrified. Please send someone now." 2 sheriff's deputies arrived at my porch at 4:17 in the afternoon. I was in the kitchen making coffee. Maisie barked once at the knock. I opened the door with my hands visible and asked the 2 young men how I could help them. They were professional. They were polite. They had been briefed on a serious report. "Sir, we've had a complaint that you brandished a firearm at a jogger on the west side of your property earlier today." "What time?" "Approximately 2:10 p.m. I was in Denver, at Rocky Mountain Hive Supplies on Leetsdale Drive. I left at 10:40, bought $120 worth of foundation wax, and got home at 4:05. My truck has a dash camera. Would you like to see?" I walked them out to the truck. I handed them a micro SD card and a laptop. The footage was date and time stamped, the GPS track clear on every frame. They watched the last 30 minutes of playback in my driveway. I-70 East came up, then Leetsdale Drive, then the parking lot of the supply store with me on camera. The older of the 2 deputies keyed his radio. "Base, this is 24. I need Sheriff Carter out here, now." Sheriff Benjamin Carter arrived 18 minutes later in his own Tahoe. Ben Carter and I had surveyed the perimeter of his family ranch in Simla back in 2019, when his father passed. He'd stood beside me on a frozen ridgeline while I drove rebar with a sledgehammer. His father, he'd said once, had always described me as the quietest, honest man he'd ever met. Ben looked at the dashcam footage. He looked at me. He looked at the statement his deputies had taken. "Thomas, who called this in?" "Rebecca Whitfield, Same woman destroyed my apiary. Same woman whose husband forged the plat. Ben's jaw set. Did you know Colorado passed a statute last year specifically criminalizing false reports of firearms incidents? Class 1 misdemeanor on the first offense. Class 6 felony if it can be proven the caller knew the report was false and that the target would suffer law enforcement response. Lying to get a swarm of officers to point guns at an innocent man is a crime. I am aware. We're going to keep a copy of this call. We're going to pull the original audio. We're going to match it against her voice. And we're going to hold this one quietly for the moment. Your attorney knows what's coming? He does. Then I'll see you at the commission meeting. He left. Emma drove down from Fort Collins the next evening. She came in through the kitchen door crying, and she did not stop crying for 20 minutes. Her roommate had shown her the HOA Facebook post. 2 of the girls on her residence floor had asked whether it was safe to come home with her for the long weekend. Someone at the campus coffee shop had refused to make her latte because that's the veteran's daughter. I let her cry on my shoulder. Then I took her hand and walked her into the den and opened the gun safe. I showed her everything. The original 1887 deed, the forged plat, Henry Caldwell's GPS field book, the CORA emails, Becca's text messages, the CSU lab receipt, the FBI and AG letters of acknowledgement. I said, justice does not come from yelling. It comes from patience, from records, and from the paperwork they didn't think to read. We are patient, we have records, and we have read the paperwork. Her breathing slowed. She wiped her eyes with the cuff of her sleeve. Mom would be proud of you, Dad. She'd have done it faster. That night, after Emma was asleep, I walked Catherine's anniversary photo from the bedroom into my office. I set it on the desk next to the keyboard. I wanted her there when it ended. Daniel Whitfield moved fast after that. He knew something was off. I don't think he knew how much. I think he thought Emma's crying and Becca's 911 stunt had been enough to scare me into a settlement. I think he wanted to close the land transfer before any of it got investigated. The preliminary zoning meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 6 p.m. at the County Administration Building on Ute Avenue. Daniel's emergency zoning resolution was item 4 on the agenda. It would formalize the amended Stonebridge boundary, declare the 15-acre parcel vacant and available for acquisition, and set up the HOA board as the selling party. If it passed, the transfer to Summit Ridge could close inside 30 days. The notice of meeting went up on the county website on a Friday night at 6 p.m. Legally required 48 hours notice. Technically legal. Functionally designed to be missed. I saw it inside 10 minutes because Sam's paralegal had set a scraper on the county agenda feed. I drove to the meeting. I sat in the back. I wore the same clean flannel and the same reading glasses. Henry Caldwell sat to my left with his field book on his knee. Eleanor Whitmore sat to my right in a navy blazer with a Cecil Whitmore ranch lapel pin. Sam Ashford was in a Denver courtroom that evening arguing a different matter. His paralegal Claire Vargas sat in the third row with a laptop and a voice recorder. Daniel came in at 5:58 in a gray suit. He set down a thick folder in front of his commissioner chair. He did not look in my direction. Becca came in at 6:01 and sat in the second row of the public gallery, legs crossed, phone in her lap. She saw me, paused, and smiled that cat smile. Then she went back to her phone. 3 other commissioners came in. 2 I knew, 1 I did not. The chairwoman was a woman in her late 60s named Maureen Lorick. She had worked with my father in the 70s on a Farm Bureau committee. I had known her my entire life. Item 4 came up at 6:20. Daniel cleared his throat and began to read. He described the amended parcel, the boundary adjustment, the best interests of the community, and the time-sensitive nature of the transfer. He laid out the HOA board's recommendation. He moved to open the floor for public comment. I did not speak. Pastor Will Yates, Eleanor's grandson, and the youngest commissioner on the board, raised his hand instead. He is 34 years old, a second-generation pastor, and runs a ministry out of a renovated Quonset hut in Simla. He is also a volunteer fire chief. He had been quietly in contact with my attorney all week. Madam Chair, before public comment, I'd like to raise a procedural point. Yes, Commissioner Yates. The sponsoring commissioner on this item is Commissioner Whitfield. I have received, this afternoon, a copy of a formal notice from the Colorado Attorney General's Office of Public Integrity. It indicates that Commissioner Whitfield is the subject of an open investigation related to the specific plat amendment this resolution would ratify. A murmur went through the room. Daniel's face lost about 2 shades of color. In addition, I have received a records preservation notice. It was served on this commission, the county clerk, and the Stonebridge Estates HOA last Wednesday. It places a legal hold on all records related to this parcel. I would like to move to table this item indefinitely, pending completion of the AG's review, and the separate federal inquiry I understand is also pending. The room stopped moving. Maureen Lorick adjusted her glasses. Seconded, she said, quietly. Commissioner Deb Talbot, on the far end of the dais, raised her hand. Second. All in favor of tabling? 3 hands up. Daniel sat with his hands flat on the table. He did not vote. He did not move. Motion carries. Item 4 is tabled. We will revisit after the AG and federal matters are resolved. Becca stood up in the gallery and walked out before the chair moved to item 5. I heard her heels on the tile. I heard the lobby door open. I stayed in my seat. I walked out after the meeting adjourned at 7:40. Henry and Eleanor walked with me. Claire was packing up her laptop. The parking lot was cold and dry. Wind was coming off the prairie the way it does in April, with that dust taste of old snow and new grass. Becca was leaning against the passenger door of her Lexus, arms crossed, waiting. She stepped into my path. You're embarrassing yourself, Thomas. This is over. I looked at her for a long moment. For the first time in a month, I let her see that I was tired. Let her see the grief and the anger under it. And then I let her see the next part. You're right, Mrs. Whitfield. It is over. I walked past her. I unlocked my truck. I got in. Maisie was in the passenger seat, waiting with her head on the headrest. My phone buzzed on the console as I closed the door. Nathan Pierce. Thomas. The commission meeting is Thursday. Full hearing, full public record. AG's office confirmed they'll be in the room. Sheriff Carter's office confirmed. I'm publishing at 10 o'clock that night. We are ready. I set the phone down. I turned the key. I looked at Maisie. Okay, girl. Thursday it is. Thursday was warm for April. 63 degrees at sunset, light out of the west, pink on the limestone rim of the courthouse. The Elbert County Commission chamber holds 120 people. By 6:15, every seat was full. By 6:25, there were people standing in the back against the wall. Nathan Pierce was in the front row. Beside him sat a Denver Post photographer, a Colorado Public Radio reporter, and a freelance videographer with 2 handheld cameras. Sheriff Carter was in uniform beside the center aisle with 2 deputies at parade rest. Assistant Attorney General Victoria Renshaw, head of the Office of Public Integrity, sat 3rd row, center. The FBI had sent a liaison in a plain dark suit. Samuel Ashford sat on the aisle. I sat beside him. Henry Caldwell sat behind us with his field book. Eleanor Whitmore was in the 2nd row, navy blazer, lapel pin. Emma wore her mother's string of small freshwater pearls. Daniel Whitfield took his seat at the dais at 6:29. Gray suit, blue tie, sweating already. Becca sat in the gallery beside Troy Hammond. Her face was made up with a little more concealer than usual. Chairwoman Lorick opened the meeting at 6:30 on the dot. Item 3. Stonebridge Estates Amended Plat Resolution. Public hearing. Sam rose first. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, I am Samuel Ashford, counsel for Thomas Brooks. I ask for 15 minutes of public comment to present factual evidence. I have reviewed the submission with the clerk and the Attorney General's office. I believe the Commission will want to hear this. 15 minutes granted, Maureen Lorick said. I stood up. I walked to the lectern. I set down one folder. I opened it. My name is Thomas Brooks. I was the land surveyor of record for Stonebridge Estates when the original plat was filed in December of 2010. In 32 years, I have never had a complaint, a sanction, or a mistake reversed by a court. I am also the owner of 60 acres on the north side of this subdivision, land that has been in my family since 1887. I laid down Exhibit 1, the original Brooks homestead deed, signed under the Homestead Act, certified, scanned, archived. Exhibit 2, the original Stonebridge plat map, signed, stamped, and sealed by me, PLS number 3241. The meets and bounds of the northern boundary are described by iron pins set by my hand. Exhibit 3. The amended plat map filed March 14, 2024, signed and stamped by, quote, Thomas Brooks, PLS number 3409. I state under penalty of perjury that I did not sign this document. The license number is not mine. The stamp is not mine. The signature is not mine. The boundary it describes is fraudulent. I laid down Exhibit 3. Exhibit 4. An independent GPS survey completed last Saturday by Henry Caldwell, PLS 2907. It confirms that the boundary has not moved since I drove the pins in 2010. Exhibit 5. The Cora response. 412 pages of correspondence between Commissioner Whitfield, Rebecca Whitfield, and Summit Ridge Development. I read 3 sentences aloud. I did not need to read more. Exhibit 6. Lab results from Colorado State University confirming dicamba drift onto my alfalfa. Exhibit 7. A letter from the Colorado Attorney General's Office of Public Integrity confirming an active investigation into Commissioner Whitfield. Exhibit 8. A letter from the FBI Denver Field Office confirming a parallel federal inquiry. I closed my folder. Commissioner Whitfield, I asked the commission to look at Exhibit 3 and Exhibit 2 side by side. One is mine, the other is a forgery, and the forgery is the document this commission was about to vote to ratify. The room held its breath for about 6 seconds. Daniel Whitfield said softly, I would like to consult with an attorney before responding. Chairwoman Lorick looked at her papers. She looked up. She looked at Sheriff Carter. Ben Carter crossed the room in 5 slow steps. 2 deputies walked behind him. He did not draw. He did not raise his voice. He placed one hand on the back of Daniel Whitfield's chair. Commissioner Whitfield, please stand. You are under arrest. Charges include forgery of a public record, a Class 5 felony, violation of the County Conflict of Interest statute, theft by deception over $1 million, and 1 count of conspiracy pending federal review. Becca stood up in the gallery. Her purse fell. This is a witch hunt. This is a setup. Everyone in this room is lying. The second deputy walked toward her row. She shouted once, went out the lobby door, and was stopped at the parking lot curb for questioning. Daniel was cuffed in the chamber. He did not speak again. Nathan Pierce's story ran at 9:57 that night. Headline: Elbert County Commissioner arrested in $1 million land fraud scheme targeting widowed surveyor. It went statewide inside 2 hours and national inside 12. I walked out of the courthouse at 7:45 into a cool April wind. Emma had my arm. Maisie was waiting on the tailgate of my truck. The prairie stretched black and low to the east. Pikes Peak showed a faint pink glow behind us to the south. I did not speak for a long minute. Emma did not either. Then she said, "She would have been proud, Dad." "I know," I said. Legal machinery is slow, but it is thorough when it starts to move. Daniel Whitfield was indicted 6 weeks later on 11 counts. The charges included forgery of a public record, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, theft by deception, and violation of Colorado's public integrity statutes. He took a plea 3 months after that. 18 months in federal custody, 5 years supervised release, full restitution, and permanent revocation of his planning certification. His signed confession named Gavin Dutton, Vanessa Colburn, and his own wife. Jerome Pickering testified against him in exchange for a reduced sentence. 6 months in county, 3 years probation. The first thing he did after sentencing was check himself into a gambling rehabilitation program. I hope it takes. Summit Ridge Development settled with me 9 weeks after the hearing. $640,000, plus all legal fees, plus a permanent injunction against any future development on any portion of my homestead. Gavin Dutton left the company 10 days later to pursue personal interests. Vanessa Colburn lost her law license by a 7-0 vote of the Colorado Supreme Court disciplinary panel, and Becca Whitfield was recalled from the Stonebridge HOA board by a vote of 94-6. Her husband's legal fees drained the family accounts. Her house went into short sale in August. She left Elbert County in a rental moving truck with her 2 cats and, I am told, 1 suitcase. The Stonebridge HOA formed a new board. Pastor Will Yates sits as an advisory transparency chair. The community held a town hall 6 weeks after the hearing and apologized publicly, to me and to 4 other families Becca had driven out over the years. They opened a community legal aid fund, funded by recall proceeds, for anyone inside the subdivision who gets harassed by overreach. I spoke briefly. I did not stay long. The things I did stay long enough to do, I did slowly. I deeded 5 acres of the hayfield to the Colorado Land Trust under a permanent conservation easement. We called it the Catherine Brooks Prairie Preserve. Native grassland, native wildflowers, 2 miles of gravel walking path open from sunrise to sunset, 365 days a year. A small limestone marker at the trailhead reads, "For Catherine, who knew the land before anyone asked. I funded the Catherine Brooks Memorial Scholarship at Colorado State University for students in land stewardship and agricultural extension. $12,000 a year, renewable all 4 years. Emma gave the announcement speech at the CSU awards ceremony, wearing her mother's pearls. The bees came back in May, 4 new hives along the west tree line. The alfalfa Catherine planted grew back in the patches the herbicide had killed, because alfalfa is tougher than most things. I walk the hayfield with Maisie every evening at dusk. The prairie wind carries the scent of wild bergamot and crushed sage. The cottonwoods rustle. Pikes Peak to the south is always the color of a bruise that's healing. I put a small flat stone at the southeast corner of the alfalfa patch, where Catherine first knelt. I carved the date and her initials into it myself. I sit next to it sometimes. I don't say much. She never needed me to. If you've read this far, here's what I want you to know. Justice doesn't come from shouting. It doesn't come from anger. It doesn't come from hitting back. It comes from the paperwork they didn't think to read, from the boundaries they didn't bother to check, from the quiet men and women they mistook for easy marks. It comes slow. It comes inevitable. It comes through the county records office at 4 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. If you're living near an HOA that has started to feel more like a cartel than a community, document everything. Photograph everything. Pull the plat from the recorder's office. Ask for CORA responses. You do not owe them your silence. Tell me in the comments below, what was your worst HOA story? What did they try to take from you? And how did it end? If this story made you cheer, please hit subscribe. Next week, the HOA president who fined a Marine veteran for flying his flag too tall. 3 years ago in Helmand Province, he was the man who kept her son alive. She had no idea.
What a story, folks! Thomas Brooks didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't show up angry. He gathered the documents, pulled the mentatas, and let the forged blood speak for itself. Rebecca Whitfield and her husband Daniel spent years thinking a retired widower in muddy boots was an easy mark. They forgot the man had signed the original plat for their subdivision himself. They forgot every iron pin on that boundary was set by his own hand. They forgot Colorado keeps his records. Daniel is in federal custody. Becca left the county in a rental truck. 5 acres of prairie now carry Catherine's name, and students at CSU will work their scholarship into careers in land stewardship for as long as the trust holds. If you have ever felt crushed by a petty authority that treats the clipboard like a badge, the lesson is in the paperwork. Pull your deed, pull the plat, request public records, document everything. The law almost always favors the person who keeps the better record. Tell me in the comments, what was your worst HOA story? What did they try to take? And how did you take it back? Hit subscribe. Next week, a Marine veteran, a Gold Star mother, and an HOA president who fined him for flying his flag too tall. 3 years ago in Helmand Province, he was the man who carried her son home. She has no idea.